What happens when a cold-blooded duke marries the woman everyone warned him was hideous, only to discover she's the most dangerous beauty he's ever seen? A marriage meant to be lifeless becomes a battlefield of pride, passion, and power. Will their clash destroy them both or forge something unstoppable? Stay until the end to see how this ruthless deal transforms into the alliance that shakes an empire. And don't forget to hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. The chapel bells tolled with all the enthusiasm of a funeral dirge. Duke Adrian Blackmore stood at the altar in his family's ancient stone cathedral, his jaw carved from the same unforgiving granite as the walls around him. 28 years old, devastatingly handsome, and completely bankrupt. The cruel irony wasn't lost on him, centuries of Blackmore pride reduced to this: selling himself to merchant gold to save a crumbling estate. Outside, autumn rain lashed against the stained glass windows, turning saints and angels into blurred shadows. Inside, London's elite whispered behind gloved hands and ivory fans, their eyes glittering with barely concealed schadenfreude. The mighty Blackmore lineage, brought to its knees. How delicious. Adrian's hands remained clasped behind his back, his posture military straight. He'd worn his dress uniform, the deep blue jacket with gold epaulets that had seen him through 3 campaigns on the continent. Let them see what he'd been before this humiliation. Let them remember that Blackmores had commanded armies when their grandfathers were still counting coins in counting houses. "Getting exactly what you deserve, Adrian," came a voice from the front pew. Lord Pemberton, his supposed friend, wearing a smirk that Adrian wanted to wipe off with his fist. "Marrying a merchant's daughter, and they say she's absolutely hideous, the face that launched 1,000 ships, all fleeing in the opposite direction." Laughter rippled through the congregation. Adrian's expression never flickered. He'd learned to wear his face like armor. Hideous. The word had followed his bride-to-be through every London drawing room for the past 6 months. Lydia Carrington, daughter of the wealthiest textile merchant in England, cursed with a face so unfortunate that no gentleman would have her, despite her staggering dowry of £50,000. Perfect, Adrian had thought when his solicitor first proposed the match. A hideous wife would demand nothing from him emotionally. No tiresome expectations of affection, no romantic delusions. She'd be grateful for his name, and he'd be grateful for her money. A clean transaction. Blackmore Manor needed immediate repairs. The roof leaked in 17 places, the east wing was uninhabitable, and the tenant farmers were on the verge of rebellion over unpaid debts. His father's gambling and his older brother's even worse speculation had bled the estate dry before both died, leaving Adrian to inherit ashes and obligations. "I heard she has to wear a veil even at breakfast," another voice stage whispered, "to spare the servants." Adrian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Let them mock. In 6 months, when the manor was restored and the Blackmore name rose from disgrace, they'd all remember this moment differently. The organ began its ponderous march. Every head turned toward the cathedral doors. She entered like a ghost, a figure in white, completely obscured by layer upon layer of Belgian lace. The veil covered her from crown to waist, so thick that her face was completely invisible. She moved with measured steps, neither hesitant nor eager, her father beside her looking supremely uncomfortable in his hired formal wear. Thomas Carrington was a self-made man who'd built an empire from nothing, and it showed. He wore wealth like an ill-fitting coat. Too much gold, too many rings, everything just slightly wrong by aristocratic standards. But his eyes were shrewd as a hawk's as they met Adrian's across the cathedral. This was a business transaction for him too. The woman, Lydia, reached the altar. Adrian caught a glimpse of her hand emerging from the cascade of lace to take her father's arm. Elegant fingers, he noted distantly, well-formed. At least she had that. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself was performing the ceremony. Carrington's money had purchased that privilege too. The old man's voice echoed through the vaulted space, intoning the ancient words that would bind them together until death. "Do you, Adrian Charles Blackmore, Duke of Thornhill, take this woman?" Adrian's response was crisp, clear, empty of emotion. "I do." "Do you, Lydia Rose Carrington, take this man?" Her voice was unexpected, rich, low, perfectly modulated. Not the timid whisper of a woman cowed by her own ugliness, but something else entirely, something that made Adrian's attention sharpen despite himself. I do. The Archbishop nodded. You may now unveil the bride. This was it. The moment Adrian would see what he'd bought. He reached for the veil with hands that had steadied cannons under enemy fire, that had never trembled in his life. The lace whispered as he drew it back. The entire cathedral seemed to inhale as one. Lydia Carrington was not hideous. She was extraordinary. Dark hair swept back from a face of such striking beauty that Adrian actually felt the impact like a physical blow. High cheekbones, a full mouth that looked designed for both cruelty and kindness, and eyes. Her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and silver and utterly fearless as they met his. This was impossible. This was... Surprised, Your Grace? Her voice was honey over steel, pitched low enough that only he could hear. Her lips curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Did you expect a monster? Adrian's mind raced, trying to reconcile everything he'd been told with the reality standing before him. Around them, the whispers exploded into a roar of shocked speculation. She's beautiful! This can't be the Carrington girl. Someone's made a terrible mistake. But Lydia's eyes never left his, and in them Adrian saw something that made ice slide down his spine. Intelligence, calculation, and worst of all, triumph. She'd known. She'd known exactly what he expected, and she'd let him think it. You may kiss your bride, the Archbishop said, looking as shocked as everyone else. Adrian leaned in, his movements controlled, his fury carefully banked. This close, he could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that spoke of power, not gratitude. We need to talk, he murmured against her ear, his lips not quite touching her skin. Oh, we will, husband, she murmured back. We absolutely will. Their lips met in a kiss that was meant to be perfunctory, meaningless. But the moment his mouth touched hers, something electric passed between them, a jolt of awareness that Adrian felt all the way to his bones. Her lips were soft but unyielding, neither submissive nor aggressive. A challenge. When they broke apart, her eyes were dancing with amusement at whatever she saw in his face. The congregation erupted into uncertain applause. Adrian turned with his new wife on his arm, presenting a united front to the crowd, while his mind churned with questions. Why had she hidden her appearance? What game was she playing? And why, despite his fury, did he find himself noticing the way she moved, with a grace that suggested strength rather than fragility? As they walked down the aisle, Adrian caught fragments of conversation. Played us all for fools. The Duke's face when he saw her. What's her game, I wonder? Lord Pemberton looked like he'd swallowed a live toad. His wife was openly glaring at Lydia with undisguised envy. Others wore expressions ranging from confusion to calculation, already reassessing their treatment of the new Duchess of Thornhill. Lydia smiled at them all, serene and untouchable as a Madonna. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the cobblestones gleaming like black glass. The ducal carriage waited, its Blackmore crest freshly repainted, Carrington money again. A footman handed Lydia up, and Adrian followed, settling onto the opposite seat. The door closed. They were alone. Well, Lydia said, pulling off her gloves finger by finger. Shall we drop the pretense, Your Grace? I'm trying to decide, Adrian said, his voice dangerously soft, whether to be impressed by your deception or insulted by it. Both would be appropriate. She met his gaze without flinching. You wanted an ugly wife. I wanted a titled husband. We both got exactly what we deserved. Explain. Must I spell it out? She tilted her head, studying him like an interesting specimen. You chose me because you thought my supposed ugliness meant I'd be grateful, biddable, easy to control. I cultivated those rumors because I needed them. Needed them? Why would any woman... To escape Lord Ashford. The name hung in the air between them. Adrian knew Ashford, a marquis with political power, wandering hands, and rumors of cruelty toward women, a predator in evening clothes. He wanted me, Lydia continued, her voice level despite the darkness that flickered through her eyes. My father's money and my attributes. He wouldn't take no for an answer, so I made myself unmarriageable to anyone who cared about beauty. And you, she gestured at him, you cared about other things entirely. We were perfect for each other. Adrian absorbed this, his anger slowly transforming into something else. Respect? Perhaps? Or maybe just recognition that he'd vastly underestimated his opponent. You could have told me, he said. Could I? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Would you have believed me? Would you have married me if you'd known I was beautiful? Or would you have worried I'd make demands on your precious frozen heart? The accuracy of her strike left him momentarily speechless. I know exactly what you are, Adrian Blackmore, Lydia said, leaning forward. You're a man so terrified of feeling anything that you'd rather marry a stranger you believed was ugly than risk actual human connection. You needed my money. I needed your name and rank to put me beyond Ashford's reach. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. Then we understand each other perfectly. Do we? She smiled, and it was sharp as broken glass. I wonder, because I should tell you, Your Grace, I didn't survive my circumstances by being meek or grateful. I won't be the silent, invisible wife you wanted. I won't hide in the country while you parade around London. I won't pretend to be less than I am to make you comfortable. The carriage rattled through London's streets toward Blackmore House, where a wedding breakfast awaited. Adrian studied the woman across from him, his wife, and felt the first stirrings of something he hadn't experienced in years. Not just attraction, though heaven help him, that was there too, but challenge, interest, the sense that his carefully controlled life had just become infinitely more complicated. I have terms, he said. As do I. You'll have the freedom of the house. Manage the household as you see fit. In public, we present a united front. In private, he paused, choosing his words carefully, we maintain separate lives, separate bedrooms. This is a marriage of convenience. Agreed, Lydia said immediately, though I have my own requirements. I want full authority over household accounts. I'll restore your estate, but I'll do it my way, without interference. I also want my own staff, people I trust, not your family's old retainers who'll run to you with tales. Done. And one more thing. Her eyes glinted. I want honesty between us. We're allies in this arrangement, not enemies. I won't play games with you if you don't play them with me. Adrian considered this. Honesty was a rare commodity in his world, where every conversation was a chess match and every smile concealed a blade. Honesty, he agreed. But understand this, Lydia. I am master of my own house. You may have bought your way into it, but I won't be controlled or manipulated. Nor will I, husband, so we're clear. They stared at each other as the carriage slowed. Neither looked away. Neither blinked. The door opened. Adrian stepped out first, then offered his hand. Lydia took it, and together they walked into Blackmore House, a united front for the watching servants, but in reality, two opposing forces bound together by necessity and mutual wariness. The wedding breakfast was excruciating. 200 guests crammed into Blackmore House's ballroom, all desperately trying to reconcile the gorgeous woman at the head table with the rumors they'd so gleefully spread. Lydia handled it with devastating grace, smiling at the same people who'd mocked her name just days before. Your Grace, Lady Pemberton gushed, suddenly her dearest friend. You must tell us your secret. Your complexion is absolutely luminous. Fresh air and clean conscience, Lydia replied sweetly, though perhaps the latter is in short supply here. Adrian had to hide his smile behind his wine glass. Thomas Carrington approached them during the third course, his face flushed with too much champagne and fatherly pride. Take care of my girl, Your Grace, he said, gripping Adrian's shoulder with the familiarity of the self-made. She's worth 100 of these painted peacocks. I'm sure she is, Adrian replied, meaning it more than he expected. When Carrington moved away, Lydia's mask slipped just slightly. He means well. He loves you. That's more than most people here can say about their families. And yours? She asked. Your parents are both gone, I understand, and your brother died. What was it, 2 years ago? 18 months. Adrian's voice was flat. Hunting accident. He'd been drinking. The horse threw him. I'm sorry. Don't be. We weren't close. It was the truth, though not the whole truth. His brother had been everything their father wanted, charming, reckless, convinced that money and luck would always flow their way. Adrian had been the spare, the soldier, the one expected to shore up his brother's messes. Until the messes became too big even for that. "And now you're the Duke," Lydia observed, "with all the responsibility and none of the preparation." "I've been responsible for other things, men's lives, battalion logistics. This isn't so different." "Isn't it?" Her eyes were too perceptive. "Men follow orders in battle. But a household, an estate, a social position, these things require different skills. Politics, persuasion, the ability to make people believe in you." "I don't need people to believe in me. I need them to obey me," Lydia laughed, a genuine sound that turned heads across the ballroom. "Oh, Adrian, you really have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, do you?" Before he could respond, Lord Ashford approached their table. Adrian felt Lydia go absolutely still beside him, her hand, resting on the tablecloth, clenched into a fist so tight her knuckles went white. "Your Grace," Ashford said, bowing to Adrian before turning predatory eyes to Lydia. "And the new Duchess. What a surprise you turned out to be." He was handsome in a dissolute way, 40 years old, silver threading through dark hair, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Power emanated from him like cologne, the confidence of a man who'd never been told no and meant it. "Lord Ashford," Lydia said, her voice ice. "I must say I feel quite deceived." Ashford's smile sharpened. "All those rumors about your appearance, and here you are, absolutely radiant. One might think they were deliberately spread to discourage suitors." "One might think many things," Lydia replied. "Few of them worth voicing at a wedding breakfast." Adrian watched the exchange with growing alertness. This was more than simple aristocratic sparring. There was history here, and none of it good. "Well," Ashford said, his eyes never leaving Lydia, "I suppose I should congratulate Blackmore on his good fortune, though one wonders how long such a spirited woman will be content in the country, married to a man who cares more for ledgers than passion." Adrian stood so fast his chair scraped against the marble floor. Every conversation in the ballroom died. "I think," Adrian said, his voice carrying the command he'd learned on battlefields, "that you've overstayed your welcome at my table, Ashford." The Marquis's eyes widened slightly. Perhaps he'd forgotten that beneath the desperate Duke was a soldier who'd led cavalry charges against French lancers. "No offense intended, Your Grace." "None taken. And yet, you'll leave." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Adrian saw the calculation in Ashford's eyes. Was this worth a scene? Finally, the Marquis bowed stiffly and retreated. Adrian sat back down. Around them, conversation slowly resumed, now flavored with this new delicious scandal. "You didn't have to do that," Lydia said quietly. "Yes, I did. You're my wife now, under my protection. That means something, even in a marriage of convenience." She turned to look at him fully, something shifting in those storm-gray eyes. "Thank you." It was the first completely unguarded thing she'd said to him. The rest of the breakfast passed in a blur of toasts and false congratulations. By the time it ended, Adrian's face hurt from maintaining his expression of ducal dignity, and Lydia looked equally exhausted beneath her perfect composure. They left together in the carriage, not for a honeymoon, they'd agreed to skip that farce, but for Blackmore Manor, Adrian's ancestral estate 3 hours north of London. "Tell me about the manor," Lydia said as the city gave way to countryside. "What am I walking into?" Adrian considered how much to reveal, but they'd agreed to honesty, hadn't they? "It's dying," he said bluntly. 97 rooms, most of them unusable. The roof leaks, the grounds are overgrown, the tenant farms are barely producing. My father took out loans against every asset we owned, and my brother made it worse by investing in schemes that collapsed. I spent my inheritance from my mother's side, keeping it from being sold at auction. Your dowry will save it, if we're careful." "How many staff?" 14, down from 40 when I was a boy. Most of the skilled craftsmen left when my father stopped paying wages. The ones who stayed, he paused, they stayed out of loyalty to the Blackmore name, which means they're old, set in their ways, and deeply suspicious of change. In other words, they'll hate me. They'll hate that I married a merchant's daughter for money. They'll hate that their duke was desperate enough to do it. Whether they hate you specifically remains to be seen. Lydia nodded slowly. At least you're honest about it. You wanted honesty. I did. She gazed out the window at the rolling hills. My father started with nothing, you know, a bolt of cloth and a gift for numbers. Everyone in his village said he'd fail. That merchants' sons should stay merchants' sons. He proved them all wrong. And now his daughter is a duchess. Now his daughter is a woman trapped in a marriage to a man who wanted her ugly. She turned back to him, and her smile was sad and knowing. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both of us desperate. Both of us making bargains we despise. Both of us pretending this is anything other than survival. Adrian had no answer to that, because she was right. Night was falling when they finally turned onto the long drive leading to Blackmore Manor. Adrian watched Lydia's face as the house came into view, a sprawling Gothic pile silhouetted against the sunset, all towers and turrets and crumbling grandeur. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's a ruin. Beautiful things often are. Her eyes traveled across the facade, taking in every detail. This is what you're fighting for, not just money or pride. This. 5 generations of Blackmores have lived here, died here. I won't be the one who loses it. Then I suppose we'd better get to work. The carriage stopped. Footmen materialized, old John, who'd been with the family for 40 years, and young Thomas, barely 16. Both stared openly at Lydia as Adrian helped her down. The household was assembled in the great hall. All 14 of them, from Mrs. Havering, the housekeeper, to Billy, the stable boy. They stood in a ragged line, their faces carefully neutral, their suspicion palpable in the air. This is the new Duchess, Adrian announced. You will accord her every respect and courtesy due to her position. Mrs. Havering, a formidable woman in her 60s, curtsied perfunctorily. Your Grace. Mrs. Havering, Lydia said, stepping forward. I understand you've been housekeeper here for many years. I'll need your expertise as we undertake renovations. A flicker of surprise crossed the older woman's face. Renovations, Your Grace? Extensive ones. This house deserves to be restored to its former glory, and I intend to see it done properly. Lydia's voice carried authority that made even the skeptical staff straighten slightly. But I'll need help from those who know it best. I hope I can count on all of you. It was expertly done, acknowledging their knowledge while asserting her authority. Adrian felt another unwelcome flicker of respect. Now, Lydia continued, I'd like to see my rooms, and then I'll need a full tour of the house tomorrow. Every room, every problem, everything that needs addressing. Can you arrange that, Mrs. Havering? Yes, Your Grace. Adrian led Lydia up the grand staircase, its carpet worn bare in places, its banisters in need of polish. The Duchess's suite occupied the east wing, rooms that hadn't been used since his mother's death 15 years ago. These were my mother's, he said, opening the door. Lydia stepped into a suite that time had frozen. The furniture was shrouded in holland covers, the windows shuttered, dust coating every surface like snow. It's perfect, she said. It's derelict. It's a beginning. She moved through the sitting room to the bedroom beyond, pulling open shutters to let moonlight flood in. Your room is through there, I assume? She gestured to a connecting door. Yes, but it stays locked. Agreed. She turned to face him, backlit by moonlight, and for a moment Adrian forgot to breathe. Thank you for defending me today. Against Ashford. You're my wife. Is that the only reason? You should say yes. Should maintain the fiction that this was nothing but business. But honesty. Damn it, they'd promised honesty. No, he admitted. I don't like bullies. Never have. Lydia smiled, a real smile this time, soft and genuine. Then perhaps we have more in common than mutual desperation, Your Grace. Perhaps. They stood there in the moonlight, two strangers bound together, both wondering what they'd gotten themselves into. Good night, Lydia. Good night, Adrian. He left her there and retreated to his own rooms, where he poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and stared into the fire, trying to understand what had just happened to his carefully controlled life. She was supposed to be ugly. She was supposed to be grateful. She was supposed to be manageable. Instead, she was brilliant, beautiful, and completely ungovernable. And heaven help him, he was starting to think that might be exactly what he needed. In her own room, Lydia finally let her composure crack. She sank onto the dusty bed and allowed herself one shuddering breath. She'd done it. She'd escaped Ashford, secured her future, and married into the aristocracy her father had always dreamed of for her. So why did she feel so alone? Through the connecting door, she could hear Adrian moving around. Her husband. A man who'd wanted her ugly, who'd married her for money, who kept his heart locked behind walls of ice and duty. This was what she'd chosen. Freedom from one cage, even if it meant entering another. But as she undressed and prepared for bed, Lydia found herself thinking about the way Adrian had stood up to Ashford, the way he'd defended her without hesitation, the way his eyes had met hers in that moment of unexpected honesty. Perhaps, she thought, this cage had more room for movement than the last one. Perhaps it even had doors. Time would tell. Outside, the ancient house settled into night, its timbers creaking, its stones holding centuries of secrets. And within its walls, two people who'd married as strangers began the long, complicated process of becoming something else entirely. Neither of them slept well that first night. Both of them wondered what morning would bring. And both of them, though they'd never admit it, were already changing in ways they couldn't yet understand. The game had begun. Dawn broke over Blackmore Manor like a judgment, cold and unforgiving. Lydia woke to the sound of rain hammering against leaded windows and the acrid smell of mildew seeping through walls that had sheltered generations of aristocrats who'd never worried about money. She dressed herself. There was no lady's maid yet, another economy, and descended the main staircase just as the household was stirring. Mrs. Havering stood in the entrance hall directing two maids with buckets positioned beneath fresh leaks in the ceiling. "Good morning, Your Grace," the housekeeper said, her tone professional but distant. "I'm afraid the storm has revealed several new problems with the roof." "Add them to the list," Lydia replied, noting the way the woman's eyebrows rose slightly at her practical response. "Is His Grace awake?" "In the study, Your Grace. He's been there since before dawn." Lydia found Adrian surrounded by ledgers, his face haggard in the weak morning light. He'd removed his jacket, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his dark hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in his eyes before his mask of control slammed back into place. "You're up early," he said. "So are you. How bad is it?" He gestured at the papers spread across the desk. "Worse than I thought. The tenant farmers haven't paid rent in 8 months because my brother forgave their debts in exchange for their votes in the last election. The remaining staff are owed 6 months' wages. There are outstanding bills with every merchant in the county." Lydia moved around the desk to study the figures. Her father had trained her well. Numbers spoke to her in ways that poetry never had. "You need immediate liquidity and a long-term restoration plan. The dowry can cover both, but only if we're strategic." "We?" Adrian's voice held an edge. "I thought we agreed to separate spheres. We agreed to separate bedrooms. The estate is different. You need my money, which means you need my involvement. I don't need your—" "Yes, you do." Lydia met his gaze steadily. "Your pride is costing you, Adrian. Every day you spend pretending you can manage this alone, the debt grows larger. Let me help." The muscle in his jaw twitched. "Fine. What do you suggest?" "First, we pay the staff. Immediately. Full wages plus a small bonus. We need their loyalty, and nothing buys loyalty like respecting the work. That's nearly £3,000, which I have. Second, we bring in my father's builders and craftsmen. They're faster and cheaper than London contractors, and they owe him favors. Third, we renegotiate every outstanding debt. Merchants would rather have partial payment now than chase a duke through the courts." Adrian stared at her. "You've been thinking about this?" "All night." "This is what I do, Adrian. My father built an empire from nothing by being smarter than people who underestimated him. I learned from the best." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite respect, but perhaps the beginning of it. "All right, we do it your way, but I lead the negotiations with the farmers. They won't respect orders from a woman. They will when that woman controls their futures. But fine. We'll present a united front." She extended her hand. Partners? He hesitated, then shook it. His grip was firm, warm, and sent an unwelcome jolt through her system. Partners. In business only. Of course. What else would I mean? The air between them crackled with something neither wanted to name. By noon, the entire household was in an uproar. Lydia had summoned the staff to the great hall and stood before them with a stack of crisp banknotes. "I'm told you haven't been paid in 6 months," she said, her voice carrying to the back of the room. "That ends today. Mrs. Havering, please distribute these wages. Full payment plus a month's bonus." The stunned silence broke into whispers. Old John actually removed his cap, something Adrian said he'd never seen the man do for anyone. "There's more," Lydia continued. "This house is going to be restored to its former glory, which means more work. Anyone willing to stay through the renovations will receive increased wages and better accommodations. Anyone who wishes to leave will receive excellent references and a month's severance. The choice is yours." Not a single person moved toward the door. Mrs. Havering approached, her severe face softening almost imperceptibly. "That's very generous, Your Grace." "It's fair, Mrs. Havering. There's a difference." Lydia turned to the assembled group. "I know I'm not what you expected. I'm not aristocracy. My father made his fortune in trade, and I'm proud of that. But I promise you this. I will fight for this house and everyone in it. All I ask is that you give me a chance." From the doorway, Adrian watched his wife command loyalty with the same ease his ancestors had commanded armies. It should have irritated him. Instead, it stirred something dangerous in his chest. The first confrontation came 3 days later. Adrian's steward, an ancient fossil named Grimsby, who'd served his father and grandfather, stood in the morning room with his arms crossed and his face set in granite disapproval. "Absolutely not," he declared. "Her Grace may have funds, but she knows nothing about estate management. Women don't have the temperament for such matters." "Mr. Grimsby," Lydia said with icy politeness, "I've reviewed your records. In the past 5 years, crop yields have declined by 40%. Tenant satisfaction is at historic lows, and you've failed to implement any modernization. So perhaps temperament isn't the issue. Perhaps competence is." Grimsby's face turned purple. "How dare you? I dare because I'm the Duchess, and more importantly, because I'm the one signing your wages." Lydia set down the ledger she'd been studying. "You have 2 choices. Work with me to implement new farming techniques and fair tenant agreements, or retire with a generous pension. But what you won't do is stand in my way." "Your Grace," Grimsby turned desperately to Adrian, "surely you won't allow—" "The Duchess has my full support," Adrian said, surprising himself with how much he meant it. "Adapt or leave, Grimsby. Your choice." The old steward stormed out, his resignation submitted within the hour. "You didn't have to back me," Lydia said quietly after he'd gone. "Yes, I did. You were right. He was useless." Adrian poured himself a drink, studying her over the rim of his glass. "You're making enemies very quickly." "Good. Better to know who stands against me than to be stabbed in the back later." Spoken like a general. Spoken like a merchant's daughter who's watched men underestimate women her entire life. She moved to the window, gazing out at the rain-soaked grounds. "They think because I'm beautiful now that the rumors have been disproven, that I must be stupid, or manipulative, or a gold digger. They can't conceive that I might simply be competent. I'm starting to understand that you're considerably more than competent." She turned, surprised. "Was that almost a compliment, Your Grace?" "An observation. Don't let it go to your head." But there was something in his eyes that made Lydia's breath catch, a heat that had nothing to do with the fire crackling in the hearth. The builders arrived the following week. 30 men from London, handpicked by Thomas Carrington and loyal to his daughter. They descended on Blackmore Manor like an invading army, their accents rough, their methods unorthodox, their efficiency undeniable. The local craftsmen, proud men who'd expected to be hired, watched with growing resentment. "She's brought in outsiders," grumbled Samuel White, the village carpenter at the local tavern. "London men who don't know our ways, mark my words, this'll end badly." Word reached Adrian through his valet, who'd heard it from a footman, who'd heard it in the village. The local community was turning against Lydia, seeing her modernizations as a tax on tradition. "Let me handle this," Adrian said when he told her. I'll speak to the village council, smooth things over. No. Lydia's voice was firm. They need to see that I won't be cowed. I'll meet with them myself. Lydia, these are proud men. They won't take direction from a woman? From a merchant's daughter? From someone they see as beneath them? Her eyes flashed. Let them try to intimidate me. I've faced worse. She rode into the village the next morning, alone except for a groom, ignoring Adrian's protests. The council met in this church hall. 15 men, all older, all convinced of their own importance. Lydia stood before them in a riding habit that cost more than their annual incomes combined, her chin high, her voice steady. Gentlemen, I understand you have concerns about the renovations at the manor. Concerns? Samuel White rose to his feet. You've brought in foreign workers, Your Grace. London men taking wages that should go to local families. I've brought in skilled craftsmen because the work requires expertise this village doesn't have, but I'm prepared to compromise. She produced a document from her bag. Half the renovation crew will be local men, trained by the London specialists. They'll learn modern techniques they can use for years to come. Additionally, the manor will purchase all supplies from village merchants at fair prices. And finally, she paused for effect. I'm establishing a fund to improve the village school and repair the church roof. The men exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected. Why? Asked another councilman. Why would you do this? Because a great house doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a community. When the manor thrives, the village should thrive too. My father taught me that. She looked each man in the eye. I'm asking for a chance. Give me 6 months. If things aren't better by then, you can have your meeting again and I'll listen. But right now, I'm asking for trust. Samuel White studied her for a long moment. You're not like other nobles. No, Lydia agreed. I'm not. Is that a problem? Slowly the carpenter smiled. Reckon it might be exactly what we need. When she returned to the manor, Adrian was waiting in the courtyard, his face thunderous. You could have been hurt, he said without preamble. Riding alone into a hostile village was necessary and effective. She dismounted, handing the reins to a groom. They've agreed to my terms. How did you... He stopped, shaking his head. Of course you did. You walked in there and charmed them all. I negotiated with them. There's a difference. Is there? He moved closer, and Lydia was suddenly very aware of how tall he was, how the rain had plastered his shirt to his shoulders. Every day you're here, you change something, the staff, the village, the very stones of this house. What happens when you decide to change me? I have no interest in changing you, Adrian. You are who you are. And who is that? A man afraid of his own feelings, a soldier who thinks emotions are weakness, a duke who'd rather be alone than risk being vulnerable. His hand shot out, gripping her arm, not hard, but firm enough to send electricity racing through her. You don't know anything about me. Don't I? She stepped closer, reckless, her voice dropping. You wanted me ugly because beautiful women have power over men. You keep everyone at arm's length because someone hurt you once. You hide behind duty and honor because they're safer than desire. Stop. Why? Because I'm getting too close to the truth? They stood inches apart, rain beginning to fall again, the air between them charged with something explosive. Adrian's eyes dropped to her lips, and for one breathless moment, Lydia thought he might actually kiss her. Instead, he released her and stepped back, his expression shuddering. This conversation is over. He strode away, leaving her standing in the rain, her heart pounding, her body aching with frustrated want. Inside, Adrian leaned against his study door, his hands shaking. She was destroying every wall he'd built, every defense he'd erected, and the worst part was, he wanted her to. The renovations progressed through late autumn into winter. The manor transformed day by day. New roof tiles replacing old, fresh paint covering cracked plaster, modern plumbing installed in antiquated bathrooms. Lydia oversaw it all with the efficiency of a field marshal, often in boots and practical dress, that scandalized Mrs. Havering and impressed the workers. Adrian found himself watching her more than he should, The way she laughed with the craftsmen, genuinely interested in their techniques. The way she solved problems on the spot, improvising solutions that his expensive architects hadn't considered. The way her eyes lit up when another section of the house was restored. She was bringing his home back to life, and damn it, she was bringing him back to life too. But they maintained their careful distance, separate bedrooms, minimal conversation beyond estate business, a marriage in name only, until the night the fire broke out. Adrian woke to shouting and the acrid smell of smoke. He burst from his room to find the hallway thick with it, orange light flickering from the direction of the west wing. "Lydia!" He pounded on her door. No answer. He tried the handle, locked from inside. "Lydia!" Without hesitation, he threw his shoulder against the door. It splintered on the second impact. He found her room empty, the window open. Terror unlike anything he'd felt in battle seized him. He ran through smoke-filled corridors toward the fire, shouting her name. He found her in the west wing, her nightgown soaked with water, directing a bucket brigade of staff and workers. Flames engulfed what had been the old library, but her quick thinking had contained it. "The wall!" she shouted to the men. "Soak the wall before it spreads!" "Lydia, get out of here!" Adrian grabbed her arm. "Not until it's controlled." She pulled free, grabbing another bucket. "The entire wing will go if we don't—" A beam cracked overhead. Adrian tackled her aside as it crashed down where she'd been standing, sending sparks everywhere. They hit the floor hard, Adrian's body covering hers, protecting her from falling debris. For a moment, they just breathed, faces inches apart, her eyes wide with shock and adrenaline. "You could have died," he said hoarsely. "So could all of them." She gestured to the staff still fighting the blaze. "I wasn't going to hide while they risked their lives for my house." "My house. Our house, Adrian. Whether you like it or not, this is ours now." Something broke inside him then. He pulled her to her feet and out of the burning wing, not stopping until they were in the courtyard, both of them coughing, covered in soot. Behind them, the staff finally controlled the fire. The west wing was damaged, but not destroyed. "What happened?" Adrian demanded of the fire brigade leader. "Faulty lamp in the old library, Your Grace. The wiring Your Grace's father installed 20 years ago finally gave out." "I told Grimsby to have that checked," Lydia said quietly. "Last month. He said it was fine." Adrian's fury was cold and lethal. "Where is Grimsby?" "Gone, Your Grace." "Your left last week after Her Grace's disagreements with him." "This was sabotage," Lydia said, her voice shaking not with fear but with rage. "He knew that wiring was dangerous and he did nothing." "We don't know that." "Yes, we do. Just like we know someone's been spreading rumors in the village about my foreign workers stealing jobs. Just like we know someone's been telling the tenant farmers that I'm going to raise their rents." She turned on him, her eyes blazing. "Wake up, Adrian. There are people who don't want me here, who don't want us to succeed, and they're not going to stop." "Then we fight them." "We?" She laughed bitterly. "An hour ago you wouldn't even call this our house." "That was before you nearly died for it." He gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're right. About all of it. This is our house, our fight, and I'm done pretending otherwise." For once, Lydia had no sharp retort. She just stared at him, seeing something in his face that made her breath catch. "Adrian, don't!" He released her abruptly. "Don't say whatever you're about to say. We're partners in this, nothing more. Agreed?" "Agreed," she whispered, but neither of them believed it anymore. The damage assessment took 3 days. The old library was gutted, thousands of pounds worth of antique books destroyed. But Lydia refused to be deterred. "We rebuild," she announced at a household meeting. "Better and safer than before." But the village's trust, so carefully won, began to erode again. The fire had been visible for miles, and rumors spread that the Duchess's modern renovations were cursed, that she was bringing ruin to the manor, not restoration. Adrian confronted it head-on, riding into the village to speak with Samuel White and the council. "My wife saved the manor," he told them flatly. "If she hadn't acted quickly, the entire structure would have been lost. The fire was caused by old wiring that should have been replaced years ago. My family's negligence, not hers." "With respect, Your Grace," Samuel said carefully, Folks are wondering if maybe the old ways were good enough. The old ways were killing this estate slowly. The Duchess's ways are saving it, and anyone who can't see that is blind. It was the first time Adrian had publicly defended not just Lydia's methods, but Lydia herself. Word spread quickly. That night she found him in his study, a bottle of whiskey half empty beside him. "You didn't have to do that," she said from the doorway. "Yes, I did. You were right. About everything. I've been so focused on protecting my pride that I nearly let everything fall apart." He looked up at her, and in his eyes was something raw and honest. "You're the best thing that's happened to this estate in generations. Possibly the best thing that's happened to me." Lydia's heart stuttered. "Adrian, I know. Partners. Nothing more." He stood, swaying slightly. "Except I can't stop thinking about you. Can't stop watching you move through this house like you were born to it. Can't stop wanting—" He stopped himself, jaw clenching. Lydia crossed the room slowly, her pulse racing. "Wanting what?" "This is a mistake," he said hoarsely, even as his hand rose to cup her face. "We agreed. To hell with what we agreed." She kissed him. It was like touching flame to powder. Adrian's arms came around her, pulling her against him with a desperation that matched her own. She tasted whiskey and smoke, and something uniquely him, and when his tongue swept into her mouth, she made a sound that was half surrender, half triumph. His hands tangled in her hair, ruining her careful braids. Her fingers worked at his shirt buttons, kneading skin. They stumbled backward until her spine hit the desk, and then he was lifting her onto it, standing between her thighs, his mouth moving to her throat. "Tell me to stop," he muttered against her pulse point. "Tell me this is insane." "It is insane," she gasped as his teeth grazed her collarbone. "Don't stop." His hand slid up her leg, gathering her skirts, and Lydia's world narrowed to his touch, his breath, the delicious weight of him pressing her into the solid wood. She'd never felt desire like this, consuming, terrifying, inevitable. The door opened. "Your Grace, Oh!" Mrs. Havering stood frozen in the doorway, her expression shocked. Adrian and Lydia sprang apart like guilty teenagers. Lydia's hair was disheveled, her lips swollen, her dress half unbuttoned. Adrian looked equally undone, his shirt open, his breathing ragged. "Mrs. Havering," he managed. "I'm so sorry, Your Grace. I heard shouting and thought—" The housekeeper's face was carefully neutral now, but her eyes sparkled with something that might have been satisfaction. "I'll come back later." She withdrew, closing the door firmly. In the ringing silence, Lydia started to laugh. It began as a giggle and built into full-throated laughter that made her sides ache. "This isn't funny," Adrian said, but his lips were twitching. "It's hilarious, the look on her face." Lydia wiped tears from her eyes. "By morning, the entire household will know that the Duke and Duchess, who insisted on separate rooms, were caught ravishing each other in the study." "I was not ravishing." He stopped. "All right, I was definitely ravishing." Their eyes met, and the laughter died. The wanting was still there, crackling between them like lightning. "This complicates things," Adrian said quietly. "Everything about us is complicated." Lydia slid off the desk, smoothing her dress with shaking hands. "Maybe we stop fighting it. And then what? We consummate this marriage and pretend feelings won't get involved? Are they not already involved?" She stepped close, placing her hand over his heart. "Be honest, Adrian. For once, be completely honest." He caught her hand, holding it there. "I don't know how to do this. How to want someone and not lose myself. How to need someone and not become weak." "Love isn't weakness. I didn't say anything about love." "Neither did I." But her eyes said otherwise. Adrian pulled her hand away gently, stepping back. "I need time. To think. To understand what this means." "Take all the time you need," Lydia said, moving toward the door. "But know this. I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not afraid of what's happening between us, even if you are." She left him there, and Adrian sank back into his chair, his head in his hands. He was falling for his wife. The wife he'd chosen because he thought she'd be safe. Easy. Uncomplicated. Instead, she was fire and brilliance and courage, and she was destroying every belief he'd held about himself. And the terrifying part was, He wanted her to. The next morning, the entire household tiptoed around them, poorly concealing knowing smiles. Mrs. Havering had clearly been busy. Lydia faced it with her usual directness, greeting the staff cheerfully and ignoring their barely suppressed grins. Adrian, less comfortable with being the subject of gossip, retreated into his study and tried to focus on the mountain of correspondence that awaited him. Among the letters was one with a familiar seal. He broke it open, read 3 lines, and went very still. Lord Ashford would be visiting Blackmore Manor at the end of the week, as a guest of the Duke of Thornhill, by ancient right of aristocratic hospitality, and there was nothing Adrian could legally do to refuse him. Adrian stared at the letter until the words blurred, his knuckles white against the parchment. Ashford, here, in his home, with Lydia. He found her in the conservatory, directing the placement of new glass panes that would replace those shattered by years of neglect. She wore a simple day dress, her hair pulled back practically, smudges of dust on her cheek. She'd never looked more beautiful or more vulnerable. "We have a problem," he said, without preamble. She turned, reading his expression instantly. "What's happened?" "Ashford is coming, Friday, as a guest, invoking ancient hospitality rights." He thrust the letter at her. "I can't refuse without causing a scandal that would destroy what little standing we've rebuilt." The color drained from Lydia's face. Her hand trembled slightly as she took the letter, but her voice remained steady. "Then we prepare." "Lydia, he's dangerous. What he wants, I know what he wants." She handed the letter back, her jaw set. "But I'm not the powerless girl he tried to corner in London. I'm a duchess now. Your duchess. He can't touch me." "Can't he?" Adrian moved closer, lowering his voice. "He's a marquis with connections to the Prime Minister. One word from him in the right ears, and he can make life very difficult for us. The renovations, the loans, everything we've built, he could destroy it." "Then what do you suggest? That I hide? That I run?" Fire flashed in her eyes. "I didn't escape one cage to cower in another. I'm suggesting we be smart about this. Keep you away from him. Post guards. Make sure you're never alone. You mean treat me like a prisoner in my own home?" "I mean protect you." His voice rose, echoing off the glass walls. "Do you have any idea what I would do if he hurt you?" The raw emotion in his voice stopped her short. They stared at each other, the admission hanging between them like smoke. "Adrian," she said softly, "you can't protect me from everything, and I won't live my life afraid." "Even if fear keeps you safe?" "Especially then." She reached up, touching his face gently. "I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" He caught her hand, pressing it against his cheek. "I don't know." "Then learn." The days before Ashford's arrival passed in a fog of preparation and tension. Adrian became obsessed with security, personally checking every lock, questioning every servant, his military training reasserting itself. Lydia watched him transform back into the cold, controlled soldier she'd married, and it broke something inside her. They barely spoke except about logistics. The fire between them from that night in the study had been doused by fear and duty, leaving only ashes. Mrs. Havering noticed, of course. She found Lydia alone in the library 2 days before Ashford's arrival, staring at the ruins of burned books. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but His Grace is driving everyone to distraction with his demands." He's worried," Lydia said quietly. "He's in love." The housekeeper's bluntness made Lydia's head snap up. "And terrified of it. I've known that man since he was a boy. I've never seen him like this. Not even in battle. He doesn't love me. We're partners. An arrangement." Mrs. Havering's smile was knowing. "Keep telling yourself that, Your Grace. But I've seen the way he looks at you when you're not watching, like you're the sun, and he's been living in darkness." After she left, Lydia stood among the charred remains and let herself imagine it, Adrian loving her loving him back. A real marriage, not just a transaction. But reality crashed back with the sound of hooves on gravel. Ashford's carriage, arriving a day early. Adrian met him in the courtyard, his face a mask of aristocratic courtesy that fooled no one who knew him. "Ashford, you're early." "I hope that's not an inconvenience, Blackmore." The Marquis descended with languid grace, his eyes already scanning the manor. "I was in the area and thought, why wait?" Of course, welcome to Blackmore Manor. The words tasted like poison. Lydia appeared in the doorway, and Adrian saw Ashford's expression shift, predatory interest sharpening into something darker. Your Grace, Ashford bowed deeply. More radiant than ever, I see. Marriage agrees with you. Lord Ashford, Lydia's curtsy was perfunctory. I trust your journey was pleasant. Tedious until this moment. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I've been so curious to see what you've done with this place. The renovations are the talk of London. Then you'll want the full tour, Adrian said, inserting himself between them. After you've rested, of course. Oh, I'm not tired at all. Perhaps the Duchess could show me around. I'd love to hear about her vision firsthand. The trap was elegant and obvious. Refuse, and it looked like Lydia was afraid. Accept, and Adrian would have to allow her time alone with a predator. I'd be delighted, Lydia said before Adrian could object. Shall we start with the gardens? Adrian's hand shot out, gripping her elbow. Actually, I believe the Duchess has other obligations this afternoon. I'll give you the tour myself. How disappointing. Ashford's eyes glittered with amusement. But I suppose I'll have to content myself with your company, Blackmore. For now. The emphasis on those last words made Adrian's blood run cold. That night, Adrian paced his study like a caged wolf while Lydia sat in the chair opposite, outwardly calm. He's baiting us, Adrian said, trying to create opportunities to corner you. I know. Then why did you offer to show him around? Because refusing would have shown weakness. He feeds on fear, Adrian. I won't give him that satisfaction. This isn't a game, Lydia. No, it's war. She rose, moving to face him. And in war, you don't show the enemy your vulnerabilities. You taught me that. I never taught you to put yourself in danger. Yes, you did. Every time you faced down the village council, instead of hiding behind your title. Every time you stood up to the London gossips. Every time you chose courage over safety. She gripped his arms. Don't ask me to be less brave than you are. He pulled her against him roughly, his face buried in her hair. I can't lose you. You won't. But neither of them believed it. The next day, Ashford requested a private meeting with Adrian in the study. Lydia wasn't invited, which meant she listened at the door. I'll be direct, Blackmore. Ashford's voice carried clearly. I'm prepared to make you a very generous offer, £50,000, double what you got from Carrington, to dissolve this marriage. Lydia's breath caught. On what grounds? Adrian's voice was ice. Does it matter? You're a duke. You have options. Annulment, quiet separation, an arranged accident. I don't care how it's done, but I want her free. Get out of my house. Don't be hasty. Think about what you could do with that money. You could pay off every debt, restore this pile of stones properly, never have to compromise your precious pride again. And all you have to do is give up a woman you married for convenience anyway. The silence stretched so long that Lydia pressed closer to the door. You think I'd sell my wife like cattle? Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. You bought her like cattle. Why not sell her for a profit? The sound of furniture crashing made Lydia jump. She heard scuffling, then Adrian's voice, barely controlled. You have until sunset to leave my property. If you're still here after that, I'll kill you myself. Hospitality be damned. She won't thank you for this, you know. Ashford's voice was smug despite the threat. She married you to escape me, yes, but she stayed for the money and the title. The moment she has what she wants, she'll discard you. That's what her kind does. My kind? Lydia threw open the door, unable to stay silent any longer. You mean intelligent, self-sufficient, unwilling to be owned by men like you? Ashford's smile was ugly. I mean merchants' daughters who think they can buy their way into our world. You'll never truly belong here, Lydia. You'll always be the pretty little shopkeeper's daughter playing dress-up. Better that than a titled monster who thinks rank excuses predation. She moved to stand beside Adrian. Leave, now, before I have you thrown out. You don't have the authority. She has every authority. Adrian's hand found hers, squeezing. This is her house as much as mine, and we're united in wanting you gone. Ashford studied them both, his expression calculating. Then he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. United, How touching. I wonder if you'll still be united when she learns the truth about why you really married her. Lydia felt Adrian stiffen beside her. What truth? Oh, didn't he tell you? Ashford's smile was vicious. Your dear husband didn't just want an unattractive wife to avoid desire. He wanted one specifically because his brother made a deathbed confession that the woman Adrian loved, the only woman he ever loved, left him for a titled man with better prospects. She told Adrian he was too cold, too controlled, too incapable of real feeling. It destroyed him. The room spun. Lydia turned to Adrian, searching his face. Is that true? Lydia, is it true? Her voice cracked. Yes. The admission was torn from him. I wanted a wife who couldn't hurt me, who wouldn't expect what I couldn't give. Caroline destroyed me once. I wouldn't let it happen again. So I was what? Insurance against your own heart? Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. A guarantee that you'd never have to feel anything real? It wasn't like that, wasn't it? She laughed bitterly. All this time I thought we were building something, that maybe, despite how we started, we could become real partners. But you never wanted that. You wanted a beautiful ghost who'd haunt your house and leave your heart untouched. That changed, Adrian said desperately. The moment I met you, everything changed. Did it? Or did you just realize that desire was unavoidable, so you might as well enjoy it while keeping your precious feelings locked away? Fascinating, Ashford interjected. But I believe I'll take my leave before this becomes truly ugly. Do give my regards to your father, Lydia. I'm sure he'll be interested to hear how his investment is working out. He swept from the room, leaving destruction in his wake. Lydia and Adrian stood in the ruins of their fragile trust, neither able to look at the other. I need you to understand, Adrian finally said. What he said, it was true when we married, but it's not true now. I don't know when it changed, but somewhere between your stubbornness and your courage and your absolute refusal to be anything less than yourself, Don't. She held up a hand. Don't say something you'll regret. I could never regret. You could never love me. Not really, because that would require you to be vulnerable, and Adrian Blackmore would rather die than be vulnerable. She moved toward the door. I need to be alone. Lydia, please. I said I need to be alone. She ran and Adrian let her go, collapsing into his chair as the enormity of what just happened crashed over him. Ashford had won without landing a single blow. He'd simply told the truth, a truth Adrian had been too cowardly to reveal himself. In her room, Lydia finally let the tears come. She'd been such a fool, thinking Adrian was different, thinking this marriage could be more than a transaction, thinking she was more than a pretty solution to an ugly problem. But she had her own secrets, her own lies that were about to come home. The knock on her door came an hour later. Not Adrian, Mrs. Havering, her face grim. Your Grace, there's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. A Mr. Fletcher from London. Lydia's blood ran cold. Fletcher, her father's investigator, the man she'd hired to keep Ashford away. She descended to find him in the morning room, hat in hand, his weathered face troubled. Your Grace, I'm sorry to intrude, but there's been a development. Concerning Lord Ashford? Yes, ma'am, and concerning the rumors about your appearance that you asked me to spread. The floor tilted beneath her. Keep your voice down. I think His Grace should hear this. His Grace should hear what? Adrian stood in the doorway, his eyes moving between Lydia and the investigator. Fletcher glanced at Lydia, who closed her eyes in defeat. It was over. Tell him, she whispered. Your Grace, Fletcher addressed Adrian, I was hired by then Miss Carrington 18 months ago to spread rumors about her appearance, to make her unmarriageable to certain gentlemen, particularly Lord Ashford, who was pursuing her aggressively. I know that, Adrian said impatiently. She told me. Did she tell you that Lord Ashford discovered her scheme 6 months ago? That he has evidence, letters in her own hand, payments to servants who spread the gossip, everything needed to prove she deliberately deceived society? The silence was deafening. Did she tell you, Fletcher continued relentlessly, that Ashford threatened to expose her unless she agreed to become his mistress? That her father's business would be destroyed, her family ruined, unless she complied? Adrian turned to Lydia, his face ashen. Is this true? Yes. Her voice was barely audible. And when were you going to tell me? I don't know, never. It doesn't matter now. Doesn't matter? Adrian's laugh was hollow. Ashford has leverage over you, over us, and you kept it secret, just like I kept Caroline's secret. We're quite the pair of liars, aren't we? It's not the same, isn't it? We both married under false pretenses. We both hid the truth to protect ourselves. At least I had the decency to feel guilty about it. The cruelty of his words landed like blows. Lydia flinched but didn't retreat. You want honesty, Adrian? Fine. I married you because you were safe, because I thought a man who wanted me ugly would never look at me closely enough to see past the surface. I could hide in plain sight, protected by your indifference. But then you started to care, and it terrified me. Because caring means vulnerability, and vulnerable people get hurt. So you kept secrets. So did you. They stared at each other, two wounded people lashing out, neither knowing how to stop. Fletcher cleared his throat. There's more, Your Grace. Lord Ashford has submitted a petition to the House of Lords. He's claiming the Duchess defrauded society, and therefore the marriage should be annulled on grounds of misrepresentation. The room spun. He can't do that, Lydia said faintly. He can try, and with his political connections, he might succeed. Fletcher looked genuinely sorry. I came to warn you. The hearing is in 3 weeks. After he left, Adrian poured himself a drink with shaking hands. We need to fight this. Get solicitors. Prepare a defense. Why? Lydia's voice was hollow. Why? Because he's trying to destroy our marriage. Is he? Or is he just finishing what we started? She laughed without humor. We were never really married, Adrian. Not in any way that mattered. We were two people using each other. Now we're two people who've run out of uses. That's not true, isn't it? Be honest. If you could go back knowing what you know now, about me, about Ashford, about all of it, would you still marry me? He opened his mouth, closed it. The hesitation was answer enough. That's what I thought. She moved toward the door. I'll sleep in the East Wing tonight. Tomorrow, we'll discuss how to handle the annulment proceedings with minimal scandal. Lydia, don't what? Don't leave? Don't tell the truth? Don't ask you to feel something you're incapable of feeling? She turned back and her eyes were dry now, hard as diamonds. I wanted to believe we could be different, that we could build something real from this arrangement. But you were right all along, Adrian. Some people aren't meant for love. Some people are meant to be alone. I don't want to be alone. Then you should have thought of that before you married someone you could never truly let in. She left him there, and Adrian didn't follow. He just stood in his study, surrounded by the evidence of their brief partnership, ledgers they'd reviewed together, plans they'd made, a house they'd saved, and none of it mattered if she walked away. The next 3 days were a special kind of hell. Lydia threw herself into work, supervising renovations with manic intensity. Adrian dealt with the legal fallout, consulting with solicitors who looked increasingly grim as they reviewed Ashford's case. They communicated through servants and notes, polite, professional, destroying each other with courtesy. The village noticed. The staff noticed. Everyone noticed that the Duke and Duchess, who'd been so united, were now living like strangers under the same roof. Samuel White found Lydia in the village, overseeing delivery of materials for the new school. Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but folks are worried. Rumor is the marriage is ending. Rumors often are just that, Mr. White. Rumors. And sometimes they're true. His weathered face was kind. I don't know what happened between you and His Grace. Not my business. But I know what you've done for this village, for the manor, for people who had nothing and now have hope. That's worth fighting for. Some fights can't be won. Some fights only can't be won if you surrender first. After he left, Lydia sat on a crate of supplies and let herself think about fighting, about staying, about looking at Adrian every day, knowing he'd only married her to protect his heart from feeling. Could she live with that? The answer came that night when she found him in the library, the restored section where new books lined the shelves they'd chosen together. He was reading their wedding contract by firelight, his face haggard. There's a clause, he said without looking up. If the marriage is annulled, you keep your dowry but forfeit all claim to the estate or the title. I know. I read it when I signed. So, if Ashford succeeds, you walk away with nothing. All the work you've done, the money you've invested, gone. Is that what you're worried about? The money? I'm worried about you. He finally met her eyes. Ashford wins either way. If the annulment succeeds, you're unprotected again. If it fails, he'll find another way to hurt you. We can't win. So we surrender? I don't know how to fight this, Lydia. I'm a soldier. I understand battlefields and strategy, but this, legal maneuvering, political pressure, destroying someone's reputation, this is Ashford's world, not mine. Then we make it our world. She moved closer. You wanted honesty. Here it is. I'm angry at you for keeping secrets, for choosing me because you thought I was safe, for only starting to care when you realized I was dangerous. Lydia, I'm not finished. I'm also angry at myself for thinking I could manipulate my way out of Ashford's reach without consequences, for hiding the truth from you, for falling in love with a man who'll never love me back. The admission hung between them like a confession. You love me? Adrian's voice was rough. Of course I love you, you idiot. Why else would this hurt so much? Tears finally escaped, tracking down her face. I love your ridiculous sense of duty, your terrible fear of vulnerability, the way you pretend not to care and then do something stupidly heroic. I love how you look at this house like it's a living thing, how you're learning to trust your instincts instead of your armor. I love you, Adrian, and I hate myself for it. He crossed the distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. I've been in love with you since the day you rode into the village alone to face down the council. Maybe before that. Maybe from the moment you lifted your veil and looked at me like I was something to be conquered, not feared. His voice shook. I was too much of a coward to admit it, too terrified that if I opened my heart, you'd destroy me the way Caroline did. I'm not Caroline. I know, you're so much more. Your fire and brilliance and courage, and I've been so busy protecting myself that I nearly lost you. He pressed his forehead to hers. I don't know how to fight Ashford, but I know I'll burn this world down before I let him take you from me. Adrian! He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, pouring years of locked-away emotion into the contact. Lydia kissed him back with equal desperation, her hands fisting in his shirt, holding him like he might disappear. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Adrian rested his forehead against hers. We'll fight him together. No more secrets, no more lies. Just us, against whatever he throws at us. Just us, Lydia agreed. The door burst open. Mrs. Havering stood there, her face pale. Your Graces, you need to come quickly. The village, it's on fire. They ran. From the manor's high windows, they could see orange flames consuming the village center. The school Lydia had built. The cottages she'd helped repair. Everything burning. How did it start? Adrian demanded as they raced toward the stables. No one knows, Your Grace, but Mrs. Havering hesitated. They found this nailed to the church door. She handed him a paper. In elegant script, it read, The merchant's daughter brings only ruin. Remove her or watch everything burn. Lydia felt ice flood her veins. He did this, Ashford. We don't know that. Who else? He can't have me, so he'll destroy everything I've built, everyone I've tried to help. She grabbed Adrian's arm. We have to stop the fire. They rode into chaos. Villagers formed bucket brigades, fighting flames that seemed to leap from building to building with unnatural speed. Adrian organized the men while Lydia helped evacuate families, her dress ruined, her face streaked with soot. Samuel White found her pulling a child from a burning cottage. Your Grace, you shouldn't be here. Where else would I be? She coughed, her lungs burning. These are my people too. Some folks are saying you brought this on us, that the note speaks truth. Do you believe that, Mr. White? He looked at her for a long moment. This duchess covered in ash, her hands bleeding from hauling buckets, her eyes fierce with determination. No, Your Grace, I don't, and anyone who does can answer to me. By dawn, they'd saved most of the village, but the school and 3 cottages were total losses. Exhausted villagers gathered in the square, some grateful, some resentful, all looking for someone to blame. Lydia stood before them, Adrian beside her, both of them filthy and exhausted. I know some of you believe I brought this on you, she said, her voice carrying in the morning stillness, that my presence here has caused nothing but trouble. You may be right, but I want you to know I will rebuild everything that burned, better than before. Not because I'm trying to buy your loyalty, but because this is my home now. You are my community, and I don't abandon my own. Pretty words, someone shouted from the back. But what about the note? What about the threats? The note was written by a coward who hides behind anonymous threats instead of facing his enemies directly. She straightened, every inch a duchess despite her ruined appearance. Lord Ashford wants to destroy me, to drive me away. But I faced worse than him, and I'm still standing. So if there's anyone here who wants me gone, say it to my face. Otherwise, we have work to do. Silence. Then Samuel White stepped forward. I stand with her grace. One by one, others joined him. Not all. Some remained skeptical, afraid. But enough. Enough to matter. Adrian's hand found Lydia's, squeezing tight. They returned to the manor as the sun rose fully, both knowing that the real battle was just beginning. In the study, Adrian found another letter. This one wasn't sealed with Ashford's crest, but the handwriting was unmistakable. You've made your choice, Blackmore. Now watch her burn for it. The village was just a warning. Next time, it'll be the manor. And her. Lydia read it over his shoulder and felt something fundamental shift inside her. He's not going to stop, she said quietly. Not until he destroys us both. Then we strike first. Adrian's voice was cold, calculated. The soldier returning. We expose him. Everything he's done, everyone he's hurt. We burn his reputation to the ground before he can touch us again. That's dangerous. He has powerful friends. So do we. Your father has connections in Parliament. I have military contacts who owe me favors. And we have the truth. He turned to face her fully.
But we...
Lydia, if we do this, if we go to war with Ashford, there's no going back. He'll use every weapon he has, including the truth about how we started. Let him. I'm done hiding. She moved into his arms, drawing strength from his solid presence. We fight. Together. Together, he agreed. But neither of them knew that in London, Ashford was already making his next move. A move that would force them to reveal their deepest secret, the one truth they'd kept even from each other. And it would change everything. The summons arrived 3 days later, delivered by royal courier and sealed with the Lord Chancellor's crest. Adrian broke it open in the study while Lydia watched from the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if warding off a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The hearing is set for Monday, Adrian said, his voice hollow. 5 days from now. Ashford's moved faster than we expected. He knows we're gathering evidence against him. He wants to end this before we can strike back. Lydia turned, and in the morning light, Adrian could see the toll the past weeks had taken. Shadows beneath her eyes, a tightness around her mouth that hadn't been there before. What are our chances? Honestly, without proof of his involvement in the fire, without witnesses willing to testify against a marquis, he stopped, unable to finish. We'll lose. The words hung between them like a death sentence. If the annulment succeeded, Lydia would be cast back into society as damaged goods. A woman who'd deceived everyone, whose marriage had failed within months. Ashford would be waiting, his power over her absolute. And Adrian would be left with a restored manor and a destroyed heart. There has to be something, Lydia said, moving to the desk where they'd spread documents, testimonies from villagers, financial records, anything that might prove Ashford's guilt. Someone who saw something, some evidence we've missed. We've been through this 100 times. Then we'll go through it 101. Her voice cracked slightly. I won't give up, Adrian. Not on this. Not on us. He pulled her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, lavender and smoke, duchess and warrior. Neither will I. But we need to be realistic about what we're facing. A knock interrupted them. Mrs. Havering entered, her expression troubled. Your Graces, there's a gentleman here. Says he must speak with you urgently. A Lord Pemberton? Adrian and Lydia exchanged glances. Pemberton, the man who'd mocked Adrian at their wedding, who'd spread the cruelest rumors about Lydia's appearance. What could he possibly want? They found him in the morning room pacing like a caged animal. When he saw them, something like shame flickered across his aristocratic features. Blackmore, Your Grace. He bowed stiffly to Lydia. Thank you for seeing me. What do you want, Pemberton? Adrian's voice was cold. Come to gloat about the annulment proceedings? No, Pemberton ran a hand through his hair, his usual smug composure shattered. I came to help, if you'll have it. Help? Lydia's laugh was bitter. You've done nothing but mock us since the day we married. I know, and I'm ashamed of it. He met her eyes directly. I was jealous, Your Grace. Jealous that Blackmore had found someone remarkable. Jealous that you'd transformed his estate while mine crumbles. Jealous of the partnership you've built. So I did what weak men do. I tore you down to make myself feel superior. A touching confession, Adrian said, but it doesn't explain why you're here. Ashford came to me 2 weeks ago, wanted me to testify at the hearing that you, Your Grace, had admitted the marriage was a sham for money, that you'd laughed about deceiving London society. Pemberton's jaw clenched. I was going to do it. I was angry enough, petty enough, but then the village burned, and I realized this isn't a game. Ashford isn't just trying to win. He's trying to destroy you both. So you developed a conscience. Lydia's tone was skeptical. So I started asking questions, and I found something. He pulled papers from his jacket. Ashford owns the land east of your estate, Blackmore. Has for years. It's worthless unless he can build a rail line through it, but the only viable route crosses Blackmore property. Your father refused to sell the easement. Your brother was about to agree when he died. Adrian's mind raced, pieces clicking into place. So Ashford needed the estate to change hands, needed someone desperate enough to sell, or needed the duchy to fall entirely so he could buy the land at auction. Pemberton spread the documents across the table. I have letters between Ashford and a railway consortium. They're offering him a fortune if he can secure the route. That's what this is really about. Not desire for your wife, though I'm sure that's part of it. Money, power. The same things that drive all of us. Lydia sank into a chair, her face pale. The fire wasn't just revenge. It was strategy. Make the estate seem cursed, drive down its value, force Adrian to sell or lose everything. And if the marriage was annulled, Adrian would be financially devastated again, Pemberton continued. Easy prey for a predatory offer. Ashford wins either way. Why are you telling us this? Adrian demanded. What do you gain? Redemption, maybe. Or just the satisfaction of watching Ashford fall. Pemberton's smile was grim. He's been a cancer on our class for too long. Using his rank to prey on women, destroying anyone who stands in his way. Someone needs to stop him, might as well be you. These letters, are they enough to stop the annulment? Lydia's hands trembled as she reached for the documents. Possibly. They prove motive, prove that Ashford's petition isn't about justice but about personal gain. But you'd need more. Witnesses. Proof of his direct involvement in the fire. Which we don't have. Adrian's frustration bled through. Everyone's too terrified of him to speak. Then you make them more terrified of you. The voice came from the doorway. They all turned to see Thomas Carrington, Lydia's father, flanked by 2 hard-faced men in working clothes. Father, Lydia rushed to him. What are you doing here? Protecting my investment, but his eyes were soft as he embraced her. You think I'd let some titled bastard destroy my daughter without a fight? Mr. Carrington, Adrian said, I'm not sure how you can help. With respect, Your Grace, you're thinking like an aristocrat, all honor and rules and legal proceedings. Thomas's smile was sharp. I'm a merchant. I think like a merchant. And merchants know that every man has a price, or a pressure point. He gestured to his companions. These gentlemen work for me. Used to be Bow Street runners before they found more profitable employment. They've been investigating Ashford for the past week. Tell them what you found, Marcus. The taller of the 2 men stepped forward. Lord Ashford owes significant gambling debts to some very dangerous people. People who don't care about titles or parliamentary privilege. He's been stalling them with promises of a big payout, likely the railway scheme your friend mentioned. He's also been corresponding with a woman in Paris, the second man added. A Lady Caroline Winters, formerly of London. Adrian went absolutely still. Caroline? The same woman who broke your Grace's heart 5 years ago, according to my sources. Thomas's eyes were shrewd. Seems she's fallen on hard times. Her titled husband died, left her nothing. She's been writing to Ashford begging for money. He's been sending it, but only in exchange for detailed information about you, Your Grace, your weaknesses, your fears, everything she learned during your relationship. The betrayal cut like a knife. Caroline had sold his secrets to his enemy. The woman he'd loved had weaponized his vulnerabilities. Lydia's hand found his, squeezing hard. What kind of information? Letters you wrote her, private confessions, details about your military service, your relationship with your brother, your deepest insecurities. Marcus's voice was carefully neutral. Ashford's been using them to craft his strategy. He knew exactly how to hurt you because she told him where you were most vulnerable. Can we use this? Adrian forced himself to think strategically, to push past the pain. The gambling debts, the correspondence with Caroline, in court? Unlikely. But in the court of public opinion? Thomas smiled coldly. Absolutely. The aristocracy might tolerate many things, but a marquis colluding with a disgraced woman to destroy a duke? That's scandal. That's the kind of story that ruins reputations permanently. We'd need proof, Pemberton interjected. Actual letters, financial records. Already have them. Marcus produced a thick folder. Lady Caroline was happy to sell us copies when we offered her more than Ashford was paying. She has no loyalty to anyone but herself. Of course she doesn't, Adrian said bitterly. Lydia stood, her spine straight, her eyes blazing with the fire that had first captivated him. So we have motive. We have evidence of conspiracy. We have proof that Ashford's been manipulating everything. What's our play? We leak it, Thomas said simply. Carefully, strategically. Let London society know that Ashford isn't the wronged party defending tradition. He's a desperate gambler trying to steal land through legal manipulation. Let them see the letters from Caroline, understand that he's been conspiring with a discredited woman. Turn him into the villain. That could backfire, Pemberton warned. If we're seen as attacking a peer without absolute proof, the backlash could destroy you both. Then we don't attack directly. Lydia's mind was racing, her father's tactical lessons coming back to her. We ask questions, plant seeds of doubt, let people draw their own conclusions. Exactly. Thomas looked at his daughter with undisguised pride. This is what I taught you, girl. Fight smart, not hard. Adrian watched them plot, merchant and duchess, father and daughter, and felt something shift in his understanding. He'd been so focused on fighting Ashford with aristocratic weapons, honor, law, tradition. But Lydia and her father fought with different tools. Information, strategy, the willingness to strike where it hurt most. What do you need from me? He asked quietly. Thomas turned to him, reassessing. Your military contacts, officers who served with you, men who respect you. We need them talking at their clubs, spreading the story of how Ashford tried to cheat a war hero. Make it about honor betrayed, not just about land or money. I can do that. Good. Pemberton, you'll work the political angle. Drop hints at Parliament that Ashford's railway scheme isn't as legitimate as it seems. Make investors nervous. Gladly, Pemberton said. And Your Grace, Thomas addressed Lydia, you're going to do the hardest part. You're going to attend Lady Rothmore's ball tomorrow night and smile at every person who's ever mocked you. You're going to be gracious, generous, and utterly unshakable. Show them that you're not afraid, that your marriage is strong, that Ashford's accusations are nothing but desperate lies. Father, I can't. The annulment hearing is in 4 days. Everyone will be watching. Exactly. Everyone will be watching. So let them see a duchess who has nothing to hide. His voice softened. You're my daughter, Lydia. You've faced down worse than gossiping aristocrats. This is just another negotiation. Adrian stepped beside her. We'll go together. United front. United front, she echoed, but her voice wavered. After Thomas and his men left and Pemberton departed to begin his political maneuvering, Adrian and Lydia stood alone in the study. Are you all right? She asked quietly. About Caroline? I don't know. He moved to the window, staring out at grounds they'd restored together. I thought I'd buried that pain. Thought it didn't matter anymore. But knowing she sold my secrets, that she helped Ashford hurt us, She's weak, desperate. Lydia joined him at the window. And she lost you, which means she lost everything that mattered. I'm not sure I was ever worth having. I disagree. She turned him to face her. You're worth fighting for, Adrian Blackmore. Worth loving, even when you're difficult and stubborn and convinced you're better off alone. Caroline was a fool to let you go. I won't make the same mistake. He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, pouring everything he couldn't say into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Tomorrow night, he said, we walk into that ballroom like we own London. We practically do, Lydia replied with a shaky smile. Between my father's money and your title, we're terrifyingly powerful when we're together. Then let's remind everyone of that. Lady Rothmore's ball was the social event of the season. 500 guests crammed into her London mansion, all desperately pretending they weren't there primarily to witness the drama between Ashford and the Blackmores. Lydia dressed with unusual care, choosing a gown of deep emerald silk that made her eyes look like storm clouds and her skin luminous. Her maid arranged her dark hair in an elaborate updo, woven with diamonds that Adrian's mother had worn. When she descended the stairs, Adrian forgot to breathe. She was devastating. Not just beautiful, but powerful. A woman who knew her worth and dared anyone to question it. You're staring, she said, but her smile was pleased. I'm appreciating my wife. Is that a crime? Only if you stop. The ballroom fell silent when they entered. Every eye turned to them. Every conversation stopped. Lydia felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their barely concealed eagerness to see her humiliated. She lifted her chin and smiled like she owned them all. Adrian led her onto the dance floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz. His hand was steady at her waist, his eyes never leaving hers. They're all talking about us, she murmured as they spun. Let them. We're more interesting than they'll ever be. Around them, the whispers began. But this time they weren't all cruel. Pemberton had done his work well. Seeds of doubt about Ashford's motives were already sprouting. I heard he owes a fortune to some very dangerous creditors, one woman said loudly enough to be overheard. And did you see the letters in the Times? Questions about this railway scheme of his? Someone said he's been corresponding with Lady Caroline Winters. You remember her, the scandal. Lydia caught Adrian's eye, saw the grim satisfaction there. Their strategy was working. Then Ashford appeared at the edge of the ballroom, resplendent in evening clothes, his smile sharp as broken glass. He cut through the crowd toward them with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. Blackmore, Your Grace, he bowed mockingly. How brave of you to attend. I'd have thought you'd be hiding in the country, preparing your defense. We have nothing to defend, Adrian said coldly. Unlike some people, we have nothing to hide. Don't you? Ashford's eyes glittered. I wonder what all these good people would think if they knew the truth. That your marriage was built on lies from the very beginning. That the Duchess deliberately deceived society. That you, Blackmore, married her knowing she was a fraud. The music stopped. The entire ballroom was listening now. If we're discussing frauds, Lydia said clearly, her voice carrying, perhaps we should talk about marquesses who conspire with discredited women to steal land, or who set fires to terrorize villages, or who use their rank to prey on anyone weaker than themselves. Ashford's mask cracked slightly. Careful, Your Grace. Slander is a serious accusation. Is it slander if it's true? She stepped forward, fearless. You wanted to destroy us because we stood in the way of your railway scheme. You used Caroline Winters to gather intelligence on my husband. You've been manipulating everything from the beginning, and now you're desperate because we've figured it out. Prove it. His smile returned, vicious. You can't, can you? You have nothing but speculation and the word of a merchant's daughter against a marquis of the realm. We have letters, Adrian said quietly, between you and Caroline, between you and the railway consortium, between you and the creditors you're desperately trying to avoid. Should I continue? The color drained from Ashford's face. We also have witness testimony from the village, Lydia added. People who saw your men near the fire, who heard them bragging in taverns about teaching the merchant's daughter a lesson. Did you really think no one would talk? You're bluffing. Am I? She smiled, cold and certain. Test me, Lord Ashford. Push forward with your annulment petition. Let's see whose reputation survives the examination." Around them, the crowd erupted in whispers. The tide was turning, and everyone could feel it. Ashford's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Lydia thought he might actually strike her, but Adrian stepped between them, his body a wall of protection. "Touch her," Adrian said softly, "and I will end you. Rank be damned, honor be damned. I will destroy everything you are and scatter the pieces to the wind." The raw violence in his voice made even Ashford step back. "This isn't over," the Marquis hissed. "Yes," Lydia said, "it is. You just don't know it yet." He left, pushing through the crowd, his exit marked by speculation and doubt. The second he was gone, the ballroom exploded into conversation. Lady Rothmore herself approached, her aged face thoughtful. "That was quite a performance, Your Grace." "It was the truth, Lady Rothmore. The truth is often performative among our class." The old woman's smile was knowing. "But I believe you. More importantly, I believe in you. You've done more for Blackmore Manor in months than 3 generations of Blackmores managed in decades. That's worth supporting." "Thank you, my lady." Others followed. Not everyone, but enough. Enough to matter. Enough to show that Ashford's power over society wasn't absolute. By the time they left, near midnight, the balance had shifted. They could feel it. In the carriage ride home, Lydia finally allowed herself to shake. The adrenaline was fading, leaving exhaustion in its wake. "We did it," she whispered. "We actually did it." "We started it," Adrian corrected. "The hearing is still Monday. Ashford won't give up just because we embarrassed him at a ball." "No, but we've given people permission to doubt him. That's something." He pulled her against his side and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in his familiar scent. "Whatever happens Monday," he said quietly, "I want you to know, I don't regret marrying you. Not for a second. You've been the best thing in my life, Lydia, the best thing that ever happened to me. Even though I'm not the ugly, grateful wife you wanted, especially because of that. You challenged me, changed me, made me feel things I'd convinced myself I was incapable of feeling." He tilted her face up to his. "I love you. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was too afraid. I'm not afraid anymore." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me." "Then we'll be terrified together." They spent that night in each other's arms, no longer divided by separate bedrooms or careful distance. They made love with the desperation of people who'd almost lost everything, and the tenderness of people who'd found exactly what they needed. Afterward, wrapped in sheets and moonlight, Lydia traced patterns on Adrian's chest. "Monday," she said. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Together. But neither of them slept well. Tomorrow would bring the fight of their lives, and they both knew it. The morning of the hearing dawned cold and clear. Adrian dressed in his military uniform, a calculated choice, reminding everyone that he was a decorated veteran, not just a desperate duke. Lydia wore a gown of midnight blue that made her look every inch a duchess. Thomas met them at the courthouse, flanked by the finest solicitors money could buy. Pemberton arrived with a stack of documents. More evidence, more testimonies, more ammunition. "Ashford's already inside," Thomas reported, looking confident. "He doesn't know what's coming." "Good," Lydia said. "Let's keep it that way." The hearing room was packed. Members of the House of Lords, influential aristocrats, journalists who'd somehow secured entry. This was the scandal of the decade, and no one wanted to miss it. The Lord Chancellor presided, his ancient face impassive, as he called the proceedings to order. "We are here to examine the petition of Lord Ashford regarding the marriage of the Duke of Thornhill to Miss Lydia Carrington. Lord Ashford, present your case." Ashford stood, every inch the wrong nobleman. "My lords, I come before you to expose a fraud perpetrated against society itself. The woman known as the Duchess of Thornhill deliberately spread false rumors about her appearance to manipulate the marriage market. She deceived the Duke of Thornhill, she deceived society, and she continues to deceive us all with her claims of legitimacy." "Do you have evidence of this deception?" the Lord Chancellor asked. "I do, my lord. Letters in her own hand, payments to servants, testimony from witnesses who participated in her scheme. Ashford began distributing documents. The marriage was entered under false pretenses and should be annulled. Lydia felt her stomach drop. He'd been thorough, more thorough than they'd expected. But then Pemberton stood. "My lords, if I may address the chamber?" "You may, Lord Pemberton." Lord Ashford's evidence proves that the then Miss Carrington took steps to protect herself from unwanted attention. What it does not prove is that the Duke of Thornhill was deceived. In fact, we have testimony from His Grace himself that he was fully aware of Miss Carrington's circumstances when he proposed marriage. He made an informed choice, as was his right. "Is this true, Your Grace?" The Lord Chancellor turned to Adrian. Adrian stood, his bearing military straight. "It is, my lord. My wife told me of her circumstances before we married. I chose her anyway. There was no deception." "Yet Lord Ashford claims—" "Lord Ashford claims many things," Thomas Carrington interrupted, rising from his seat. "My lords, I am but a merchant, and perhaps have no right to speak in this august chamber, but I have evidence that this petition has nothing to do with justice and everything to do with greed and vengeance." He produced the documents Marcus had gathered, the railway scheme, the gambling debts, the correspondence with Caroline. Lord Ashford needs Blackmore land for a railway venture. He's tried to acquire it through legal means and failed. So now he attempts to destroy the Duke's marriage, hoping to drive him into financial ruin and force a sale. This isn't about protecting society. It's about protecting his investment. The chamber erupted. Lords shouting, journalists scribbling, Ashford on his feet demanding to be heard. "Order!" The Lord Chancellor's voice cut through the chaos. "Lord Ashford, what say you to these accusations?" "They're lies. Desperate fabrications from a merchant trying to protect his daughter's ill-gotten position. We have letters," Adrian said coldly, producing Caroline's correspondence. "Between you and Lady Caroline Winters, plotting against me, using information she provided to craft your strategy. Shall I read them aloud, or would you prefer to withdraw your petition quietly?" Ashford's face went purple with rage. "You have no right." "I have every right to defend my marriage and my wife," Adrian's voice rang with command. "You've terrorized villages, conspired with criminals, and attempted to destroy two people whose only crime was standing in your way, and I won't let you win." The Lord Chancellor studied the documents, his face growing darker. Finally, he looked up. "This hearing is adjourned. I will review all evidence and render a decision within 1 week. Until then, the marriage of the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill remains valid and binding." It wasn't a victory, but it wasn't a defeat either. As they filed out, Lydia caught Ashford's eye across the chamber. His expression promised retribution, promised that this wasn't over, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of him. Outside, in the cold London air, Thomas embraced his daughter. "You were magnificent in there, girl." "We were magnificent," she corrected, pulling Adrian into the embrace. "All of us." "What happens now?" Pemberton asked. "Now," Adrian said, "we wait for the Chancellor's decision, and we prepare for whatever Ashford does next." But that night, as they returned to Blackmore Manor, something had shifted. The house felt different, not just restored, but alive. The staff greeted them with genuine smiles, not careful formality. The village had lit bonfires in celebration, word having spread of their performance at the hearing. Samuel White met them at the manor gates. "Your Graces, we want you to know, whatever that London lord decides, you'll always be our Duke and Duchess. This is your home. These are your people." Lydia felt tears prick her eyes. This was what they'd fought for. Not just their marriage, not just the estate, but belonging, community, home. That night, lying in bed with Adrian's arms around her, she finally allowed herself to believe they might actually win. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," he replied, "and I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving it." Neither of them knew that miles away in London, Ashford was making one final, desperate play, one that would force them to risk everything they'd built for a chance at complete victory. The real battle was still to come. The messenger arrived at dawn, pounding on the manor doors with the urgency of a man bearing catastrophe. Adrian took the sealed letter with hands that had steadied under enemy fire, but trembled now, because this wasn't battle. This was everything that mattered. The Lord Chancellor's seal gleamed red in the pale morning light. Lydia appeared at his shoulder, still in her nightgown, her hair loose around her shoulders. "What does it say?" Adrian broke the seal and read aloud. "The petition for annulment is denied. The marriage of the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill is legally sound and shall remain binding. Furthermore, this chamber finds evidence of malicious intent and recommends investigation into Lord Ashford's conduct." The words hung in the air for a breathless moment before Lydia's composure shattered. She laughed, a wild, relieved sound that echoed through the entrance hall, and threw her arms around Adrian's neck. "We won," she gasped against his chest. "We actually won." Adrian held her tight, his own relief so intense it made him dizzy. "We won." But the celebration was short-lived, because Adrian knew Ashford well enough to understand that legal defeat would only drive him to more desperate measures. Men like Ashford didn't accept loss. They escalated. He was proven right 6 hours later. Thomas Carrington's men arrived at speed, their horses lathered, their faces grim. Marcus, the former Bow Street runner, dismounted and strode directly to where Adrian and Lydia were reviewing estate accounts. "Your Graces, we have a problem. Ashford left London this morning with 12 armed men. He's heading this way." The blood drained from Lydia's face. "Armed? Why would he?" "Because he's lost everything," Adrian said quietly, the soldier in him already calculating distances and defenses. "His reputation is destroyed. His railway scheme is finished. The gambling creditors will come for him now that he has no prospects. He's got nothing left to lose." "Which makes him extraordinarily dangerous," Marcus agreed. "My sources say he was raving in his London house, talking about how you stole what was rightfully his. He's not thinking clearly, Your Grace. He's thinking like a cornered animal." "How long until he arrives?" Lydia's voice was steady despite her pale face. 4 hours. Maybe less if he pushes his horses." Adrian's mind raced through options. They could flee to London, seek protection from authorities. But that would mean abandoning the manor, the village, everyone who'd placed their trust in them. And it would mean showing fear, which Ashford would exploit mercilessly. "We stay," he said. "We defend what's ours." Adrian, 12 armed men, against a duke with military training, a village full of loyal people, and everything to fight for? He turned to Marcus. "Can you get word to my former regiment? Any officers within riding distance?" "Already done, Your Grace. Sent riders an hour ago, but they may not arrive in time." "Then we hold until they do." Adrian's voice carried the command that had steadied soldiers under artillery fire. "Marcus, I need you to organize the village men. Anyone who can handle a weapon. Anyone with military experience. Samuel White served in the Navy. Put him in charge of the eastern approach." "Your Grace, these are farmers and craftsmen, not soldiers." "So was I once, and Lydia wasn't a duchess, but she became one when it mattered." He looked at his wife, seeing the fear in her eyes, but also the steel. "We all become what we need to be." Thomas Carrington had been listening from the doorway. Now he stepped forward, his merchant's mind already working the problem. "I can bring men from my warehouses in the village. They're not fighters, but they're loyal and they're angry about the fire. Ashford made this personal when he burned their homes. Every person helps. We just need to hold long enough for reinforcements to arrive." "And if they don't?" Lydia asked quietly. Adrian met her eyes. "Then we make our stand anyway. Together." The next 3 hours were controlled chaos. The village transformed into something between a fortress and a community in arms. Men who'd never held weapons were given makeshift clubs and positioned at key points. Women and children were moved to the church, the sturdiest building, with guards at every entrance. The manor itself became the command center. Adrian positioned defenders at strategic windows, organized bucket brigades in case of fire, and checked every approach route with the precision of a battlefield commander. Lydia worked beside him, her merchant's daughter practicality showing in every decision. She organized medical supplies, ensured food and water for defenders, and coordinated communication between different defensive positions. Mrs. Havering, watching the Duchess direct logistics with military efficiency, muttered to another servant, Never seen anything like her. Born to this she was, even if she wasn't born into it. Pemberton arrived unexpectedly, riding hard from London with 3 of his own men. Couldn't let you have all the glory, Blackmore, he said with a grin that didn't quite hide his fear. Besides, my estate borders yours. If Ashford succeeds here, mine's next. Glad to have you. Adrian clasped his shoulder. Take the south approach. If they try to flank us, I know what to do. I wasn't just a dilettante at university. I paid attention during military history. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Adrian found Lydia in what had been her mother-in-law's sitting room, staring at a portrait of the previous Duchess. She was beautiful, Lydia said softly. Your mother. She was strong. Like you. Adrian moved behind her, his arms circling her waist. She would have liked you. Would have been proud of what you've done here. Would she have been proud of us? Of how we started? She married my father in an arranged match. No love, just duty and alliance. But they built something real from that foundation. He turned her to face him. We've done the same. Only better, because we chose to fight for it. Adrian, if something happens, nothing will happen. If it does, she insisted, I need you to know that marrying you was the best decision I ever made. Not because of the title or the protection, because of you. Because you saw me, really saw me, and loved me anyway. There's no anyway about it. I love you because of who you are, not despite it. He cupped her face in his hands. And we're going to survive this, and spend the next 50 years arguing about estate management and driving each other mad. She managed a shaky laugh. Promise? Promise. The church bells rang out, the signal they'd arranged, riders approaching from the east. Masim. Adrian kissed her once, hard and desperate, then released her. Stay in the manor. Promise me. Like hell. I'm not hiding while you fight. Lydia, we're partners, remember? In everything, including this. There was no time to argue. Adrian grabbed her hand and they ran to the manor's highest point, the tower that overlooked the eastern approach. 12 riders, just as Marcus had warned. But Ashford had miscalculated. He'd expected to find a vulnerable estate, frightened servants, easy prey. Instead, he found nearly 100 people standing ready, weapons in hand, determination on their faces. The riders pulled up at the manor gates, Ashford at their head. Even from a distance, Adrian could see the wildness in his eyes, the desperation that made him more dangerous than any calculated villain. Blackmore! Ashford's voice carried clearly in the still air. Send out the woman and I'll leave the rest of you alone. Adrian stepped onto the tower balcony where Ashford could see him, Lydia beside him, their hands joined. You're trespassing on my land, Ashford. Leave now and I'll forget this madness. Madness? Ashford laughed, the sound unhinged. The madness is thinking a merchant's daughter could play Duchess. The madness is letting people like her contaminate our bloodlines. I'm here to restore order. You're here because you lost, Lydia called down, her voice carrying strong and clear. You lost at the hearing. You lost in society. You lost in every way that matters. And now you're here with hired thugs because it's the only power you have left. I have enough power to burn this place to ashes, Ashford gestured to his men, to take what should have been mine from the beginning. What was never yours to take, Adrian's voice dropped to the command tone that had sent men into battle. You have 10 seconds to turn around and leave. After that, you're an invader on my property, and I will respond accordingly. With what? Farmers and servants? Ashford sneered. I have trained mercenaries, and I have something better. Adrian looked at the people assembled below, villagers, servants, Pemberton's men, Thomas's workers. I have people fighting for their homes, for their families, for something that matters. What do your hired men fight for? Coin you probably can't even pay them? He saw doubt flicker across the mercenaries' faces. Good. Doubt was a weapon. Last chance, Ashford. Right away. Now. Instead, Ashford drew a pistol. I'll kill you both myself if I have to. He fired. The shot went wide, but chaos erupted. Ashford's men charged the gates while Adrian's defenders responded. But these weren't soldiers meeting soldiers. This was desperation meeting determination, and the outcome was far from certain. Adrian ran down from the tower, drawing the sword he'd carried in battle. Lydia right behind him despite his earlier protests. They reached the courtyard just as the gate shuttered under a battering ram. "Hold the line!" Adrian shouted. "Don't let them through!" But one of the mercenaries had already scaled the wall, dropping into the courtyard with practiced ease. He came at Adrian with a club, and suddenly it was real. Combat, not theory, lives at stake. Adrian's military training took over. He sidestepped the blow, struck with the sword hilt, sent the man sprawling. Another came at him from the side and another, and he was fighting two-handed now, defending ground and position and everything that mattered. Through the melee, he saw Lydia, saw her grab a fallen club and strike at a mercenary who'd gotten past their defense. Saw her fight with the same fierce determination she brought to everything, no longer the merchant's daughter or even the duchess, just a woman defending her home. Pride and terror warred in his chest. The gates were giving way. Samuel White and his men were holding the eastern approach, but the main entrance was failing. In minutes, Ashford's full force would pour through. Then, like divine intervention but better, because it was human and loyal and earned, they heard the thunder of hooves. Adrian's former regiment, 30 cavalry officers, came over the rise at full gallop, their uniforms gleaming, their weapons drawn. And behind them, impossibly, more villagers, people from neighboring estates, farmers from miles around, everyone who'd heard that the Duke and Duchess who'd restored Blackmore were under attack. Ashford's mercenaries took one look at the approaching force and broke. They weren't being paid enough to face a cavalry charge. They scattered like leaves, leaving Ashford alone at the gates with his wild eyes and his empty pistol. Adrian walked toward him slowly, sword still in hand, every inch a duke and a soldier, and a man who'd fought too hard for what he had to lose it to a coward's desperation. "It's over, Ashford." The Marquis looked around at the assembled crowd. Hundreds of people now, all watching his defeat. His face crumpled, and for a moment he looked almost pitiable. "I should have had everything," he whispered. "Title, land, respect. I was born to it. What are you? The spare who became duke by accident? And her, a merchant's daughter playing dress-up. Why do you get to win?" "Because we earned it," Lydia said, stepping beside Adrian. "Because we fought for it. Because we built something real instead of trying to steal what others created. That's the difference between us, Ashford. You thought you deserved everything. We knew we had to work for it." The cavalry commander, Captain Reynolds, dismounted and saluted Adrian crisply. "Your Grace, shall we escort Lord Ashford to the authorities? Attempted armed invasion, assault, arson, quite a list of charges." "Do it." Adrian watched as they took Ashford into custody, the Marquis's protests fading as he was led away. It should have felt like victory. It did feel like victory, but also like the ending of something, the closing of a chapter written in fire and fear. The crowd began to disperse, neighbors checking on neighbors, villagers returning to homes. The immediate danger passed. But the community that had assembled, that remained. The bond forged in shared defense would last far longer than the threat. Thomas Carrington found his daughter in the courtyard, checking on a wounded villager. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. "Nearly gave me heart failure watching you fight like that." "I learned from you, Papa. You always said never back down when something matters." "Didn't expect you to take it quite so literally," but his eyes were proud. "You've become someone extraordinary, Lydia. Duchess in more than name." "I had good teachers." She looked at Adrian across the courtyard, directing the cleanup, ensuring the wounded were cared for. "The best." That night, as the last of the helpers departed and the manor settled into exhausted quiet, Adrian and Lydia stood in the great hall surveying the damage. Broken windows, scorched gates, blood on ancient stones. "It'll take weeks to repair all this," Lydia said. "We have weeks. We have years. We have the rest of our lives." Adrian pulled her close. "And I intend to spend all of them with you. Even though I'm troublesome and stubborn and bring armed mobs to your doorstep?" "Especially because of that." He kissed her forehead. "You make life interesting, Duchess. You make it worth living, Duke." They stood there in the wreckage of their battle and the foundation of their future. Two people who'd started as strangers in a transactional marriage and become something far more powerful. Partners, allies, lovers, friends. The next morning, Pemberton appeared at breakfast with news from London. "Ashford's been formally charged. With his gambling debts and the criminal charges, he'll be lucky to avoid prison. Definitely won't avoid ruin. The railway consortium has already distanced themselves, and several families are considering legal action for past grievances he kept buried with his rank. It's really over, Lydia said wonderingly. Not quite. Pemberton pulled out another document. The Lord Chancellor sent this. Official recognition of your contributions to the Blackmore estate, Your Grace, and an invitation to present at court. Seems someone was impressed by a duchess who fights alongside her people. Lydia took the invitation with shaking hands. Court presentation. The ultimate acceptance by society. She looked at Adrian, saw him smiling. You've earned it, he said simply. Over the following weeks, as repairs progressed and life returned to normal, the true impact of their victory became clear. Other estates began modernizing, following Lydia's example. Merchant families and aristocrats started intermarrying without the shame that had once accompanied such matches. The rigid class barriers that had seemed immovable began, just slightly, to shift. And at Blackmore Manor, something remarkable grew. Not just a restored estate, but a model for what could be built when people stopped clinging to the past and started investing in the future. The school reopened, better than before. The village thrived with new industries Lydia's father helped establish. The manor became known not for its former glory, but for its present vitality, a place where innovation met tradition, where change was embraced rather than feared. Adrian discovered he had a gift for teaching young men returning from military service how to transition back to civilian life. The manor's restored grounds became a training center, helping soldiers find purpose beyond battle. Lydia established a fund for women seeking to escape dangerous situations, using her own experience to provide refuge and resources. No woman would face Lord Ashford alone, not while the Duchess of Thornhill had power to wield. Together, they rewrote what it meant to be aristocracy in a changing world. 6 months after Ashford's defeat, they hosted a grand celebration, part wedding anniversary, part victory party, part statement to everyone who doubted them. The ballroom at Blackmore Manor gleamed with new paint and old elegance. 500 guests filled the space, but this time the whispers were admiring rather than cruel. Adrian stood at the edge of the ballroom watching Lydia dance with her father, her laughter carrying above the music. She wore emerald silk that matched her eyes, and she moved with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly who she was and what she was worth. She's magnificent, said a voice beside him. Adrian turned to find an elderly duchess, one of the most influential women in society. Yes, she is. I was wrong about her, about you both. I admit it freely. The Duchess's eyes were sharp but kind. What you've built here, it's more than a restored estate. It's a new way of thinking, and perhaps that's what we needed. People who didn't know they were supposed to fail. We knew, Adrian said quietly. We just didn't care. The Duchess laughed. Even better. Keep not caring, Your Grace. The world needs more of it. As she walked away, Lydia appeared at Adrian's side, slightly breathless from dancing. What did the dragon want? To admit she was wrong about us. To say we're changing things. Are we? Lydia looked around the ballroom, at aristocrats mingling with merchants, at servants treated with respect, at a society slowly learning to value worth over birth. I suppose we are. Any regrets? Adrian asked, pulling her into his arms as a waltz began. About which part? The rumors I spread? The deception? The marriage to a man who wanted me ugly? Any of it. All of it. Lydia looked up at him, this man who'd become her whole world, and smiled. Not one single regret. You? Only that I wasted so much time being afraid of feeling this. He spun her across the floor. I love you, Lydia Blackmore. Every stubborn, brilliant, dangerous inch of you. Good, because you're stuck with me. For life. Promises, promises. They danced as the night deepened. Two people who'd started as a transaction and become a revolution. Proof that the best partnerships weren't built on perfect beginnings, but on the choice to fight for something better. Later that night, alone in their shared bedroom, no more separate rooms, no more careful distance, Adrian found Lydia at the window, looking out over the grounds they'd saved together. What are you thinking? He asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. That we did it, against everything, society, Ashford, our own fears. We built something real. We did. And I was thinking about the woman I was when I arrived here. How terrified I was. How certain this was just another cage. She turned in his arms. Thank you for proving me wrong. Thank you for refusing to be the easy wife I thought I wanted. For challenging me. For being so completely, impossibly yourself that I had no choice but to fall in love with you. Was it really so impossible? Completely. Wonderfully. Perfectly impossible. He kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. But then we seemed to specialize in impossible things. Like turning a marriage of convenience into a love story. Like turning a crumbling estate into a thriving community. Like facing down a marquis with nothing but courage in each other. Like changing the way an entire society thinks about class and worth and marriage. Lydia smiled against his lips. When you put it that way, we're rather remarkable. We are. Though I'd appreciate it if our next impossible achievement involved less mortal peril. No promises. I seem to attract drama. You attract life. And I'm here for all of it. They stood together at the window as morning light began to creep across the horizon, gilding the grounds in gold. Below them, the estate was waking, servants beginning their day, villagers heading to work, the whole complicated machinery of community that they'd built together. It wasn't the manor Adrian had inherited, broken and desperate and dying. It was something better, something they'd created from vision and stubbornness and the refusal to accept that some things couldn't change. What do we do now? Lydia asked softly. We've won. We've survived. We've proved everyone wrong. What comes next? Adrian considered. We live, we build, we love. We show everyone that what we started here, breaking down walls, building bridges, creating something new from old traditions, that it works, that it matters. That's a lot of pressure. Good thing we're used to pressure, Lydia laughed, the sound filling the room with warmth. Good thing we have each other. Always, Adrian promised. Through every battle, every challenge, every impossible thing that comes our way, we face it together. Together, Lydia agreed. And they did. In the years that followed, the Duke and Duchess of Thornhill became legendary, not for their title or their wealth, but for what they represented. A partnership between classes. A marriage built on respect and choice, rather than duty and transaction. A model for what could be achieved when people stopped defending the past and started building the future. They had children who grew up knowing that worth wasn't determined by birth, but by character. Who learned from their mother's business acumen and their father's honor, who carried forward the legacy of change. The manor thrived, becoming known throughout England as a place where innovation and tradition coexisted, where servants were treated as valued employees, where tenant farmers had rights and respect, where the old ways adapted to serve the new world. And through it all, at the center of everything, Adrian and Lydia remained what they'd become in those crucible months of fire and fear, partners in the truest sense. Two people who'd married as strangers, fallen in love through conflict, and built something that transcended both. On their 10th anniversary, Adrian found Lydia in the library, the restored library where they'd once made love, surrounded by charred books and broken promises. Now it was magnificent, filled with volumes from around the world, a testament to resurrection. Do you remember the night we first kissed? He asked. In my study, both of us terrified and pretending not to be? I remember everything, every argument, every moment of doubt, every time we chose each other over easier paths. She turned from the shelf she was examining. Why? Because I want to make sure you know I'd do it all again, every impossible, painful, glorious moment. Because it led to this. To you. To us. Lydia crossed to him, her smile soft and knowing. Even the part where you wanted me ugly? Especially that part, because it taught me that what I thought I wanted was nothing compared to what I needed. He pulled her close. I needed you. Fierce and brilliant and completely ungovernable. I needed you to tear down every wall I'd built and show me what it meant to really live. And I needed you to show me that partnership doesn't mean surrender, that I could be strong and vulnerable, that love doesn't weaken, it multiplies everything good. She kissed him softly. We saved each other, Adrian. We did. And we'll keep doing it. Every day for the rest of our lives. They stood together in the library as afternoon light painted the room in amber. Two people who'd started with nothing but desperation and built an empire of the heart. Outside, the estate hummed with life. The village flourished. Children played in streets that had once been battlegrounds. And everyone who'd been part of their story carried forward the lesson. That change was possible, that love could conquer class, that two people determined to build something better could shift the foundations of the world. The merchant's daughter and the desperate duke. The transaction that became a partnership. The survival story that became a love story. And in the end, the marriage that proved that sometimes the most powerful revolutions begin not with armies or declarations, but with two people standing together and refusing to accept that things have to stay the way they've always been. Together, they'd changed everything. And together, they would keep changing it for as long as they both lived.